welcome. And I'm going to go ahead and start up my presentation and get going. Some good news, this is going to be probably a full hour of just demo. I'm just going to show you a lot of cool stuff in Azure, how to save money, how to get your costs under control. We're going to spend a lot of time. I want to apologize ahead of time. My name is Michael O'Neill, by the way. I work for Fuji, and I'll do a quick introduction here in just a second. But when I picked my shirt this morning, I didn't think about what room I was going to be in, and it's the exact same color as the wall behind me. So if you see this giant white floating head, I apologize. I probably should have worn a darker color, but we will make do while we can. I've also got with me Veronica. She is our VP of Sales, and she is actually not feeling well, but rather than go home like I told her, she's a trooper and she's hanging in. So Veronica, I don't know if you want to say hi for a second. I don't know if you can say hi. But she can. She'll be on the call too. You're going to have a chance, by the way, also to ask questions throughout today's session. I love to have people take questions as we go, and probably the best way to do that is through the chat window. Oh, there's Veronica. Veronica, you want to say hi? Oh, I think you're still muted, but that's okay. That's Veronica. Just want everyone to say hi to Veronica.
Nice to see you.
There you go. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Veronica. You want to tell us real quick about yourself?
Sure. Super quick version. I am Veronica Malika, VP of Sales here at Fuji, and my background is in technology and cybersecurity recruiting. I worked in technology recruiting for about 23 years and had my own firm for 18, with the last 6 focused on cybersecurity. And I've been here at Fuji for about 4 months.
Very good. Excellent. So I'm going to see if I can move these windows around and make sure that you all can see my presentation. So we'll do a quick test. Can you all see that, or do you see the window with the controls on it? Veronica, do you see the PowerPoint slides, or do you see the webcam and the other stuff too?
I see the slide and the webcam.
Okay. So I need to learn how to do this. I'm used to doing this in Microsoft Teams, so you all bear with me. See if I can make this go away. See if I can turn that off. There we go. And I'm going to turn this off. Okay, this is going to be a little difficult because I want to make sure I get any Q&A that people ask. So what we're going to do is we'll just move forward, and I'll check back every once in a while and make sure that we have time. Well, I don't want to leave the webinar, so that's a bad idea. So normally I have multiple screens. I'm going to hide this down at the bottom, get it out of the way. We'll do it that way. Okay, so let's get started. Today's session is really going to be on optimizing your Azure spend. And what I want you to understand is this is not a hardcore sales presentation. I'm going to do a quick section on who is Fuji, who am I, what is a Fuji Expert Connect, that's this event, and I'll explain why we call it that, and then 60 minutes plus of technical discussion. This is going to be a deep dive. This is not a bait and switch sales presentation or anything like that. I hate that, and I wouldn't do that to you. This is a series of events, though, that we're going to be doing. It's just knowledge transfer. It's just talking about some of the coolest, latest technology. We're going to talk about low-code, no-code apps. We're going to talk about data pools. We're going to talk about security. We're going to talk about Azure and cloud and everything else out there. And I'll show you this in a slide. So let's dive in real quick. I've got 1 minute, 2 minute, who is Fuji? Fuji is a worldwide consulting partner. We have an organization with headquarters here in the United States, here in Dallas, Texas. I'm actually broadcasting from our headquartered office today. We have also a facility in Costa Rica. We also have a facility in India with about 600 people and growing stronger. We got cloud architects, data architects. We do solutions for customers. Our Costa Rica offices are really for nearshoring for our US customers as we do managed services. If you look at the services we provide, there are only 4 buckets here. And I think it's important to talk about what we provide versus what we don't provide, which is almost as important. I love the fact that we're very narrowly focused in these areas. We're into digital product engineering, quality engineering, and this low-code, no-code development that's really become hot nowadays. We're into cloud and helping you move to cloud, advisory services, architecture, managed services. We've got our whole security set up. And again, we have a huge operation down in Costa Rica where we can provide managed services and security ops 24/7. And we do a lot of data analytics, which includes data engineering, setting up data lakes, data pools, etc. We do a lot of Power BI. We do a lot of analytic tools to help customers get a hold of data and make it make sense. What you don't see on here is all the stuff we don't do. If you come to us and you ask and say, hey, I want you to accounting solution, would you do accounting? We don't, and we'll tell you flat out. I do not like, having worked with partners before, I don't like working with partners that raise their hand every time and say, yeah, we do that, yeah, we do that. And then they're like, go hire someone that does accounting, right? We won't do that to you. We know what we're good at. We stay in our swim lane. These 4 things we're exceptionally good at. And that's it really from a sales perspective. Who am I? You can read about this. I'm an ex-Microsoft employee. I was there for 18 plus years. I helped run Microsoft's seminar division, which included MSDN, TechNet, TS2, and small business. So if you've ever been to those events back in the 2000s, that was my team and a team of really talented people out there doing that. I just, so you understand, I'm a generalist, something you don't see at Microsoft anymore. Today they have specialists, someone who's really focused on one product and can go super deep. The reason I can do these types of events for you and talk about this technology is I'm a generalist. My job is to understand how all the technology fuses together to make these solutions. I'm really passionate. People always wonder, if you were at Microsoft for 18 years, why aren't you retired and on an island? And the answer is that I just love solving customers' problems. Give me your toughest problems and I'll help you figure out how this technology is going to come together and solve it. And I'm still engaged by Microsoft on a pretty regular basis. They've brought me back repeatedly. I jokingly say it's like the mob, you just can't get away, but it's somewhat true. They do keep me going, and they do keep me on these regular deployments. I just got off one last year on Azure, and I'm going to share some of that knowledge with you today. Last thing before we get into our demo, what is a Fuji Expert Connect? It's not a sales webinar, right? And even the word webinar is kind of poisoned now. A lot of people got out there and they just started finding webinars were low-cost ways to do it, and they put out a lot of junk, to tell you the truth. And so they make them these sales events and they try to plug you in, they try to do this. I'm not going to do that. We're done with the sales discussion. We're going to get into the technology and we're going to really do some knowledge share. I want to share with you not only, you know, the how, when, where, all that other good stuff, but I really want to explain some of the why, getting to some of the reasons why Microsoft in particular made decisions they did with Azure and how it all kind of comes together, helps you retain the knowledge, helps you understand it at a deeper level. And then it's a little tougher with this tool because I wanted to turn on all the microphones and make sure I take as many questions as you go. It's a speaker's trick to say, well, let's hold questions to the end. I don't want to do that. I want to answer your questions anytime you want. And I don't want it to be just questions. I'd love discussions. If you have a thought or share an idea or this happened to you, I want to hear from you. How we do that with this tool, I'm not 100% sure, to tell you the truth, but we'll see if we can figure it out as we go along. You always have that chat window, and if you'll put stuff into the chat window, we can read it back and we can answer questions that way. That's probably the easiest way to do this for now. You'll also have at the end, I'm going to ask you 4 really simple questions. If it takes you more than 20 seconds to answer, something's wrong. The questions are, how did I do? Did I give you good information? How was the demos? The third question is, would you ever recommend this to a friend? I'm not asking you to do that, but that's how this thing grows and we get more people, is by people saying, yeah, that was really good use of my time. I can't wait for the next one. And if you tell other people, that helps it grow. The last question is, in case I didn't answer your question or you wanted a deeper discussion, or you just want to talk to Fuji and find out what it is we do, and maybe we can help you out in some way. It simply says, do you want us to call you with discussing any particular topic? That's it, 4 questions, and we're done. It just helps me make better content. Okay, let's get going. Let's dive in and let's talk about Azure spend. Actually, let me back up for a second because I really want to kind of set the stage for this. Why are we even having this discussion? Microsoft is making a ton of money on Azure. I don't know if you've seen their financial statements, but they're doing really, really well. By the way, so is Amazon, and so is Google and Oracle and all the other cloud services, right? The problem is they're almost doing too well. And what I mean by that is, especially during the pandemic when it first came out, organizations had to rush to get to cloud. They really needed to go as fast as possible because they had a lot of people suddenly working from home. And most companies that I was talking to, they had 2 to 3 year plans that were kind of in the works where they were going to move to a more open system, a work from anywhere kind of deal. And suddenly those 2 year plans became 2-month plans. They had to deploy really, really fast. The cloud's a perfect solution for that. Everyone jumped in. Azure sales went through the roof, Google sales, Amazon sales, et cetera. The problem is we were rushing so fast to get those products supported that they didn't put a lot of what we call governance on top of this. In other words, they didn't think it all the way through. And it's understandable. I'm not being critical, right? We were in a tough situation. But now, after the fact, 2 years later, 3 years later, customers are starting to get hit with bills that are 3 times larger than what they had ever anticipated their bill would be by using cloud services. And it's like, well, wait a minute. I thought moving to cloud was going to save me money. I thought it was going to be more optimized. I thought it was going to be a better solution overall. And the answer is, it should be. But because we rushed and because we didn't do a lot of the interim steps, what's happened is these costs have gotten totally out of control. Believe it or not, Microsoft is highly motivated to help customers not spend money in Azure. And I know that sounds self-defeating, right? Why would they do that? Well, the answer is because customers with these huge bills and they don't understand why they're being billed for this and what is this server running and who set this up, all those kind of questions that people are starting to get hit with. They realize if that continues, they're not going to be a long-term customer. And Microsoft understands, and Google and AWS understand that if they don't help you control these costs, it's all going to kind of fall apart. And so last year, Microsoft hired me to go out and deliver these things called Cloud Adoption Framework events. Microsoft paid for it. I went in and talked to some of their biggest customers, and I helped them kind of pull the controls back under. I'm still in the process of working with organizations and with Microsoft to try to do this. We offer these services as well to our existing customers. So if anyone is interested in one of these workshops, we can talk to you about that. But today I'm going to give you some of the information on what the workshop's about, how it can save you money, and even if you just want to do it yourself, I'll give you some of the feedback on how to do that. So in order to understand why we got into the situation we did, and it's no one's fault, right? It was the pandemic just kind of accelerating everything. It makes sense to talk about the most common mistakes inside of Azure. And so I listed some of these out, and I want to talk about them. Not choosing the right data store. Customers have this belief that, you know, the easiest solution for any database is throw out a SQL server or something. SQL is pretty expensive. And so what happens is there's tons of other options that are out there. There's the new Dataverse from Microsoft, which is a great solution. There's even just things like SharePoint lists and Microsoft lists. Lists can hold millions of records inside them, and they're easy to set up, and they have really good throughput, and they can do a lot of stuff for you. So you don't always have to blow out your data stores with a high-end transactional SQL Server relational database. There are cheaper, easier to use solutions out there. Another problem is high availability. Now, this is one where customers try to save money. So Microsoft will ask you, do you want to make this resource available with high availability? And they're like, I want to save a few bucks. I'm going to say no. What they don't realize is, of course, every online system has to have maintenance time. Even though we have 5 nines, 99.99999, at some point they are going to have to maintain and update and patch the machine. If you do not select high availability, your machine's going to go offline. Your website suddenly is no longer going to be available as it's being patched and maintained. Even though it's a very small percentage of its uptime, there still will be time that goes down. High availability is really inexpensive. It costs you very, very little. You check the box, and all it does is when it's time to do maintenance on that server, it just spins all the traffic to another instance of itself so that your website or your solution or your workload continues to operate while in the background the original version is being patched and fixed. And then as soon as that's up and running, the workloads shift right back. So we realize that most customers make the mistake. They try to save a few bucks, Well, that's not where you need to be saving a few bucks, right? That's worth keeping up so your website's always available and you don't have those problems. The biggest culprit of all, oversizing VMs. And I'm going to show you a live demo. And a matter of fact, I told you I hate PowerPoints. Let's just go in and show you a live demo right now. I'll jump back and forth, but I really want you to see this in action. I'm going to go out. I think I've already plugged in here. And all I've done is I put in portal.azure.com. It's the same location you would use to log in. Of course, when you go to portal.azure.com, it's going to ask you for your credentials. And when you plug in your credentials, it'll put you into the portal and we're ready to start working in Azure. You'll notice that I'm logged into the Fuji account up here. So I have a tenant set up for me to do demonstrations like this. And I'll tell you an interesting story. The first time I'd ever worked in Azure, I was working with another engineer and we were super excited. We were kind of geeking out. Wow, this is cool. Let's play around. And of course, we're like, let's create a resource. So you click on the create a resource. And I'm going to show you what we call, Microsoft would never use these words, but what we call giving yourself enough rope to hang yourself. In other words, get yourself in trouble without realizing it. We started playing around. And if you say, I want a resource, you start looking, there's a lot of things I could do. There's databases. Look at all the different databases I can have. There's some blockchain, there's compute structures, there's Internet of Things. You could just play around to your heart's content. I just want to do something simple, like I want to set up a virtual machine or a virtual server. And you can see if I go into compute here, I have all these different options. Here's a data center server, a Windows 10 Pro, Ubuntu, Red Hat, all the competitive products are out here as well. And without me really thinking about it, I'm like, let's just do something simple. Let's create a Windows 10 machine. So I click the button, and just like in AWS, just like in the other cloud services, it starts to ask me a bunch of questions. And if you don't understand the questions, if you haven't thought it out, what I want you to see is how quickly you can kind of get yourself into a bit of a bind. So what's my subscription? I put in a credit card here that I use for this. It's asking about what's your resource group. I don't even know what a resource group is, but I see this one called Mike's VM group. That's a horrible name, and we'll talk about that in a second, but I'm going to pick that. What's your virtual machine? I don't know, Mike's cool VM, which again is a horrible name. And it says, well, wait a minute, you can't use spaces, you can't use these special characters. So I got to go back and edit this. I'm going to take out my spaces. So there's a little bit of control there just to make sure, but I'm putting in a very undescriptive answer to this. And I'm going to show you in a second a slide that talks about how we fix some of these problems. But if I keep going, look at all the places I can put this, up in Norway and Switzerland and all the parts of the world where the Microsoft Cloud currently exists. Where I should put it is in the location closest to me, which in the Microsoft Azure server side, that's going to be South Central, which covers the Dallas area. I want it close to me for two reasons. One is I want the shortest latency possible. So I want to be able to get to that server, get back in the shortest round trip. And number two, it's a cost issue. The closer I have it to me, the cheaper the resource is for me to use. If I put this over in Japan and I say, wow, I could run this out of Australia or Japan or wherever, okay, cool, sounds neat. I love the idea I could put it anywhere on the globe, but my cost just went up rather significantly because I'm using such a far away resource, and Microsoft will charge me more for that. And then I can keep going. I'm not going to take you through all this right now, but I just want you to see it's going to ask me about my availability zone and my security type and what image do I want. Now, images are actually the configurations of the servers themselves. And you see that I have some custom built, pre-sized ones. This one's for Oracle. If I'm running an Oracle Linux server, here I have the data center for Windows Server, etc. You can put all this in, you can build custom pre-built one, or you can go in and actually start picking all the different information out yourself. So for example, if I want to see all the images or I want to configure my own version of VM, you can go in and you can start selecting every little bit of this. The disk size, how much memory do you want to use? Do you want to use SSD drives, or do you want to do the old physical hard drives? Again, to save money. You can go as crazy as you want, and I will show you later on where we can get to this infinite level of detail. Most people, especially me and this other engineer that were just trying this out, we were like, look, I can have 32-bit process or 32 processors running inside this with 2 terabytes of RAM memory running, and it sounds great, but of course I'm not the one paying the bill. I'm totally oversizing this thing. And you just keep going on and on. What kind of disk do you want to use? This is what I'm talking about. Do you want ultra disk? Do you want SSD disk? Do you want them redundant? Do you want them regular? And you just keep going. I can do that. What about your network? How are you going to set that up? What about your managing and monitoring? And on and on and on. And we were just hitting random stuff, and we spun up this virtual machine, and it was really cool, and it was great. And we said, all right, fine, let's get back to our day job. And didn't think about the fact we didn't turn it off. It was still running. Now, if you don't apply governance to this, what's the chance that someone in your organization is aware that you just spun up one of these resources and now it's billing time? Because of course, Microsoft doesn't charge you to create these resources, they charge you to run it. So while the system is running, the meter is actually spinning and ticking over. And this is how organizations can very quickly lose control over their cloud environment. I see a server, I get the bill, I'm like, someone spun up a SQL server. I have no idea what the SQL server is being used for. Is this one of our projects? Is this something from marketing or from the accounting team? I have no clue. I don't know who did it. I don't know why they did it. I don't even know if I should be paying for this. I don't know if this is an orphaned resource. Maybe Mike spun this up and then Mike left the company 2 years ago and this thing's just been sitting there constantly billing time because no one knows what it's for and what it's used for. So these are the very problems that we're going to try to solve today. I'm going to take a half second and jump over, and of course I've got some people from my team from Fuji on here, and they can be monitoring this chat to see if there's any questions. And you guys from Fuji, please feel free just to interrupt me if there gets a question posted in the question board. And right now I don't see anything. You can see in your tool right here, if you'll just go to questions. Actually, that's not chat, that's the questions to load up. But if you go into the chat session, you can chat up your questions and they can interrupt me and interpret them. So I want to make sure I'm giving you feedback as we go. So Fuji employees, if you can help me monitor that, that would be fantastic. I appreciate it. Normally I have 2 screens, but I apologize today. I'm only with 1, so we're just gonna make do. So do you see how you can easily start getting in trouble? And do you see how if you're an IT manager or you're trying to control this and you get a monthly bill and suddenly it's $3,000 for a month and it's all itemized, it's all listed for the resources, but with a name like Mike's VM or Mike's Cool VM or something, it doesn't tell me anything. I don't know what it's for. I don't know if it's a real use scenario. I don't know if it's dev or test or what environment it's running on. I don't know anything about this resource. I'm going to get in over my head very, very quickly. And because of the speed that people needed to, and because they didn't spend probably as much time as they needed to in thinking this all through, the spend gets out of control, and now they're just wasting money inside of Azure. And the worst thing that you could do, and I think everyone would agree with this, is go back to the old age of try to bring it all in-house again. That's just going to cost you even more money. Let's fix what's out there. You've made the commitment, you've gotten out to the cloud. It's very simple steps now to put some controls and start honing those stuff back in. So let me show you what that's about. Let me go back to my slides, and we'll kind of go a little bit deeper in this, and we'll show you exactly what I'm talking about. I hate not having my multiple windows here because I can't see everything that's on my screen anymore. We kind of drag this out of the way. I think that's my problem. There we go. Now I can see it. Okay, so we'll go back to presentation mode. So choosing the wrong data store, oversizing these VMs. There's also this battle that goes on, and I am not exaggerating. I'm not making this up. Every time I talk to a customer, there's this fight that happens between those who are trying to govern the cloud and those that actually use the cloud. My son is a Java developer. He works in a development house, and they have this all the time. They're like, look, I'm building a web app. I need to spin up a database for this. Could you make this happen? And they're like, fill out this form. What do you need? And how much RAM? And they ask you all these questions. and he'll spec it out, and then he'll send it to the cloud governance committee, and they're like, well, no, you don't need this. It needs to be much simpler than this, and you only need this amount of memory. And this fight goes back and forth and back and forth. Gartner, IBM, bunch of the biggies in the industry researched this, and they found on average 6 weeks of back and forth fighting between interdepartments before they finally got this resource created. That was the average for US businesses. And when I've done this session before, I've often opened it up to my crowd, and people are like, 6 weeks? I wish 6 weeks. I'm talking 6 months. So it could be a lot worse depending on your organization and the size and everything else. But I consistently hear this from customers again and again and again, of this constant battle. They just need to get this thing done, and they're in this back and forth. So that's a big issue that comes up. And then I've already talked about the last one, orphan resources. Someone leaves, they create a bunch of garbage, they don't clean it up, no one has any idea if it's good or bad, and it takes a long time to go poll people and figure out, is this still a valid resource or not. So what we're going to do is we're going to talk about some of the things that Microsoft has put in place, including securities, policies, automations, naming conventions, resource taggings, and blueprints. And I'm going to kind of lay this out for you, just like I did when I did these presentations last year for these enterprise accounts. We'll kind of talk about the specifics of it. That number one, though, security, is a lack of governance can actually create massive security holes, which no one wants to hear, right? If you don't think through the governance, if you don't do this properly and follow the proper steps, even accidentally, you could make some serious security problems, and that's not something you want to be dealing with. We're going to close that up by applying these good governance principles. In order to do this, I need to make sure everyone's on the right page. And to make sure everyone's on the right page, what I'm going to do is make sure you understand how Azure is organized, kind of from the top down. I'll share a little inside story here. When Microsoft first asked me to go do these CAF events, I think they assumed that every client knew how Azure was organized. And very quickly, I came back to Microsoft and I'm like, I'm going to add a bunch of slides because I don't think everyone's got the same understanding of how kind of the schema happens. And so I added these slides, and Microsoft, sure enough, came back and said, yeah, that's a great idea. Clearly, this helps. The way Microsoft builds things in Azure, they use this hierarchy, and at the highest level is what you call the management groups, okay? And just real quick, management groups, subscriptions, resource groups, and resources. Those are your 4 levels, obviously. And I'll talk to each of these real quickly. Here's the interesting thing about it. These are nothing more than file folders. That's the easiest way to think about it. They're just naming conventions that help you get your stuff organized, okay? So especially these top 3, management groups, subscriptions, and resources, are literally just like file folders in your file manager. They hold things, and the group above holds the things below. So management groups can hold subscriptions, and resource groups all the way down to the bottom. Those resources at the bottom are the things you create inside of Azure. I want to spin up a virtual machine, or I want to create a web server, or I want to whatever it is that you come up with at the base level, that's what those end resources in. But which group I put them in determines things like my security access. It determines how I organize. It determines all my billing requirements, things of that nature. And so this is kind of a hierarchy, and I'm going to show you a real life example here in a second. You'll see it's not a perfect match to the hierarchy, but even things like subscriptions are who has the buying authority to spin up a SQL server or a web server, or use some AI procedures, or whatever it is I want to consume inside of Azure. The subscription gives me the right to purchase or the right to deploy those types of services. But it's still just a folder. It's still just an organizational schema. So I think this will make sense when I move to the next slide. Before I do, though, one last feature I want to talk about, which is at the bottom here, there's naming conventions. Do you remember when I put in Mike's Cool VM, which was a horrible name because it doesn't tell me anything? Most organizations pick a naming convention and they should stick with it. What we've discovered, and what I discovered when I did this tour for Microsoft, with 57 enterprise level accounts that I went and talked to and presented to. I thought for sure they all had naming conventions, and they did on-prem. What's fascinating is for some reason, when they moved to cloud, they abandoned their naming conventions. And again, that's a very fast way to get yourself in trouble. A naming convention simply says, when you build anything, you need to use this standardized naming. And I've used one that's very, very classic here. A lot of organizations use this. You don't have to use this exact format, but you see it says object, environment, resource, client, location, number. Okay, and what we mean by that is when I spin up a resource and I give it a name instead of Mike's Cool VM, I should use this format by declaring it first by what type of object it is, what type of environment, what type of resource, etc. And I want to use the briefest, shortest abbreviation I can in order to do this. So I'm not going to type out virtual machine, for example. I'm going to put VM because it's very obvious to understand what that is. So here's an example at the bottom. This is a VM, so it's a virtual machine. That's the object that's running in my demo environment, or this could be test environment, or this could be production environment, or whatever environment you want. What is its purpose? What resource is it using? Well, this is a SharePoint server, so I'm going to put SharePoint. It says, what's the client? Well, depending on which client I'm currently working with, I'd put their initials. What server in the Microsoft Cloud, Azure Cloud, is it running off of? This is South Central. And what number of instance? Because I might have virtual machines or I might have multiple databases, I would give it a number. I thought this was a pretty cool example, and I used this for years. I've left it on here because I was working with an Azure architect at our organization who came back and said, Mike, that's a terrible example. Mike, what are you talking about? He said, well, first off, realize in the Microsoft world, you have some limitations on naming. It's not like Linux where you can use these really, really long naming conventions, or Apple world where you can, in OS X and iOS, you can use super long naming conventions. Windows limits the amount of characters that you can use. And so his point was, yes, you shortened virtual machine to VM, but you wrote out the whole thing as SharePoint. Why not just put SP? SP is the only possible resource that SharePoint could be. There's no other resource that Microsoft creates that would use the initials SP except SharePoint. And then he brought up again that I put South Central US. He's like, why? All you had to do was put SC. It's the only cloud region that you would have had to have done. So again, this is what our architects will do when they talk to you and they work through your cloud system, is help you build a naming convention. And again, we don't care what the naming convention is. Use what makes sense for your group, but most importantly, be consistent. Just keep using it again and again and again. Now, your argument is going to be, I can't force my engineers to do this. Oh, yes, you can. And that's called governance. And we're going to show you exactly how you can do this. You can actually force them to apply naming conventions. You can even apply it for them automatically. And we'll get into some of this when we get into blueprints and some of the policies and schemas and other stuff, kind of stealing my own thunder. But this is really important. This naming convention is critical because it also helps us figure out, especially when we start talking about costing and what is this resource for and who's in charge of this and all this kind of stuff. I need to know that, and I can see some of that in the naming convention itself. This is what it really looks like when you build a hierarchy. Now, I haven't built this for all 4 levels, so you'll notice I didn't do any resource groups. I didn't do any resources because it gets very complex, but I tried to show you kind of these top 2 levels. Now, the very, very top, the absolute, in the Fuji world, Fuji.com, that's our domain. That's called the root management group. It's the head of every Azure deployment there is. And so what's going to happen is under the root management group, I get to decide how I want to set up my organization. And I'll use these management groups to do it. Now, in this particular case, you can see these management groups are set up by divisional titles. So I decided I wanted HR to all be in one group and IT in another, marketing, sales, etc., whatever you decide. But you don't have to do it this way. If you're a worldwide organization, maybe I have North America and EMEA and Africa and my different continents or divisions of my company. Maybe I set it up by my product. I'm a automobile company, and maybe I want my SUV division and my sports car division and my utility truck division. It's totally up to you. So it's how you want to set that up determines how kind of all this structure goes. I mentioned level 2 was these subscriptions, but these subscriptions can be up at the highest level, or they can filter on down into sub folders. It doesn't matter. You'll notice too that subscriptions can be repeated. So I have 2 examples. I'm sorry, I have 3 examples here. I have an EA subscription or enterprise agreement. And by the way, Microsoft doesn't call these EA anymore because every year they have to change the name of everything just to confuse us. But these do have a different name now. Here's a free trial subscription. Maybe you got an MSDN account. They'll give you here a dev test subscription that comes from MSDN. Microsoft has these freebies they hand out. It doesn't matter. You get to determine where you want these licenses to be. And everything kind of rolls downhill. So not only does this help me organize my environment in Azure better, but I also can apply security. Now, Veronica is the most trustworthy person on the world. She is awesome. I would trust her with anything. So I can give Veronica security access at a management group level. And by doing that, she automatically gets access down to the subscription, resource group, and resources level. So it always flows downhill. It doesn't work in reverse. Mike O'Neill, brand new employee, seems like a nice guy, but I don't know if I trust him 100% yet. We'll get there. But for right now, I'm going to give Mike access to the SQL server at the resource level, but that does not allow me to go to these other resources in these other branches, and it doesn't allow me to work my way back up the system. I don't have access at all the resource groups, subscriptions, and management. So again, those security, what they call role-based access controls inside of Azure, RBAC, flows from the top down. I can set it per user, I can set it per resource, but they don't flow from the bottom back up. So again, if you set the time and you get the structure set right, you work with a cloud architect and you really think it through how you want to set it up, we can automatically start creating advanced security, permissions, plus, as I mentioned, the reporting that comes back from these resources now will report in, so I could tell my sales department, show me all the resources my sales department is using. We call this a show back or a bill back. No one really, I haven't found many customers that do bill backs. Bill backs mean the IT manager will go to the sales marketing person and say, hey, sales, here's all the resources you're using. Here's your bill for all your Azure expenses. That would be a bill back. And they know it because they've set up the organizational structure so that all the marketing comes out of the marketing department. All the IT comes out of the IT. So if something down here is an expenditure down here is consuming Azure resources, it'll be come through in the GO2 region 2 billing or in the production or the IT. I could go back to the IT manager and say, here's all your IT resources and every bit of the billing that came from that. And so it's no longer a mystery of why someone used this or what they used. Again, I'll pause for a second. Any questions? No one's interrupting me, so I'm assuming there's no questions. So I'll just keep on going. And I know I talked fast. We got a lot to cover, but I'll try to slow down. I get excited about this stuff. It's really cool. I want to make sure you feel some of that excitement too. Resource tags are the next thing we want to talk about. This is where people get lazy, and it drives me crazy because these things are so powerful. And I've always wondered why people don't use these a lot more. And I started to realize when I looked at the Microsoft literature describing these things, they said it's a tag that consists of a valued pair. And I read that the first time and I'm like, great, what does that mean? What's a valued pair? Some of you know, it simply means you get to pick the object that you want to describe and the value of that object by using a pair of words, right? So you can create these tags, these resource tags, and I've given some examples of very popular ones. You might want creator or owner of the resource, right? So if I was creating a valued pair of a resource and I say the first part of the tag, the object is the owner, And then I can set the value of owner equal to Mike O'Neill or Veronica or whoever else, doesn't matter. And so I created a category called owner, and then I can set that to various values depending on who is the owner of the resource that's been generated. Another great one, department or cost center, right? So if I know my cost codes inside of Fuji, I would put my cost center or my cost code as a tag on here. I'd say department equals 1106. And people inside of Fuji knows, oh, okay, that's this group within inside of the organization. Resource tags are not limited. You can put as many of these things on here, and you should. You should use them rather prolifically to say who it is that's building this, why are you building this, what is this thing for, all the kind of metadata that you want to have attached to these resources. I can do so using resource tags. Why do you want to do this? Okay, I get that it describes the resource better, but here's the best part of this. Anything you tag also filters up through the costs. So if I go into my costs inside of Azure, I can set filters based on these tags. Let's say, for example, Mike O'Neill is no longer with the company, he decided to leave. And I don't want orphaned resources. I don't want things that Mike spun up to be sitting there and billing for years because no one thought to go close them down. Well, if I have resource tags and the owner tag is tied to Mike O'Neill, I can run a report and say, show me every resource related to Mike O'Neill that has owner equals Mike O'Neill. Boom, up comes every single thing that Mike O'Neill had generated inside the company. And I can say, shut it all off, turn it all off, right? He's no longer here. We're going to close that out. No more orphan resources, no more resources billing time when they're no longer needed or no longer used. Another one that I really like in here, there's role and project and stuff, but one that I'm going to call out as kind of special is right here, this lifespan. This is awesome. Lifespan allows you to estimate when you think that this thing is no longer going to serve its purpose. So I could put lifespan equals, and I'll put it as April 1st of 2024. I think it's going to be good for a year. Now, by putting lifespan in here as a resource tag, I now can go back and run a query and say, show me every lifespan tag. Some people call it good until, or they come up with different names. It doesn't matter. You get to pick which one you want. But show me every lifespan tag whose date is before today's date, meaning its life is over according to its lifespan. So I can run that report and suddenly 3 resources pop up that's by default should have already expired because they guessed they would only need it for a year. I start looking at those resources and I notice they're also tagged with an owner, and one of the owners is Mike O'Neill. So I call up Mike O'Neill and I say, hey, Mike, I'm looking at your SQL Server database that you created in Azure, and you had a lifespan. You said you only needed it through February of this year. It's now March, April. Do you still need this? And if I say, oh, yeah, I'm still using it. I'm sorry, I just underestimated it. Great, go back into the resource tag under lifespan and just change the date to something else so it won't show up in my report. Or if I say, oh, I totally forgot about that. Wow, yeah, I'm not even using that anymore. Then I can immediately go in and close these things down. So you're starting to see how we can get ahead of this and stop orphan resources. We know exactly what they're being used for. We can do some cost accounting reporting. I'm going to show you some examples of what the reports look like, where we can see by these resource tags and say, I don't want to waste money anymore. Let's just close these down because it's an enormous amount of money that's being wasted. I had a report from Gartner, and I think they want, I need to look it up again. I should have done that before this, but the amount of money being wasted by lack of governance, it's almost in the trillions of dollars. It's just scary. And for most organizations, it's a huge chunk of their IT budget that's just being thrown away because they haven't put simple governance on here. I'm not trying to sell you anything. I'd love to be able to come in and work with your company, do a workshop, teach you all this stuff. That's fantastic. But even if you don't do that, at least now you know what to look for. You can kind of go check out and see if your organization is having this issue to the same extent. This is what the dashboards look like. This one on the left is graphical and colorful, and it's wonderful. You can drag and drop and create your own look and feel for what you're tracking and how you want stuff to go. Some organizations, however, excuse me, some organizations prefer more of a table-driven or almost like a bill. Again, for that bill back or show back. I said people don't like to do bill backs, but they love to do show back. I want to show my marketing VP of marketing, hey, your IT department has done this amount for you with Azure services. We're taking the hit on this to provide services for you, and I just wanted you to see what it was. So here's a nice kind of tabular format laid out showing what the spend is, how much they're using, bit by bit. And again, the IT manager can then go to the marketing manager and say, okay, here's your bill. Look this over and tell me, is there anything that doesn't make sense? And you're like, yeah, why is this Project Neptune on here? We haven't done that in 2 years. Okay, good. Let's close that off. And so showbacks also are another way to control some of the costs. I normally would show a demo in this demo environment that I have, my Azure that's set up here. Let me jump back. I'm going to cancel this. Remember, you can build these resources and they do not cost you any money until you turn them on, and only when they're being consumed, they're being billed. So I can jump out of this without any worry of ongoing costs. If I go back to my dashboard here in Azure, you'll see that you have a search bar up here. And if I type in the word cost, for example, I have cost alerts, cost exports, cost management, cost analysis. So it's very easy to find what I need. I also have a toolbar at the top here that always shows me the last things I've been working on. So whatever I tell it I want to do, it loads it up and then it loads it as the first thing. So the very last thing I used was cost management. And that's how I know in this particular demo, I haven't turned on any resources. So you're going to see some very boring numbers at 0 on 0, 0, because I haven't consumed anything. I've set up stuff, but I haven't consumed them. If I was going to create something, let's go back and let's just make a simple network. Just want to create something super simple, super easy to do. I'm going to get into the weeds too fast. I don't want to do it. I was going to show you the valued pairs, and valued pairs simply allow me to go in and set those properties. But again, when I set the properties, owner equals Mike O'Neill, all that becomes filterable in these reports that I am talking about here. So again, at the very top, I know this is too small to see. I don't think I can blow that up for you. Oh, I can blow that up for you. There we go. So if I slide this over, each one of these pages has a filter section on the top where it says add filter. If I click on this, one of the filters is resource tags. And I can say, okay, show me my resource tags, and it says owner and used by and all this other stuff. And I click owner, set owner equals Mike O'Neill. And now when the report gets generated, it's only those resources that have been tagged by me as Mike O'Neill owned resources, or only resources of a certain department, the marketing department or the sales department. So this is how you start to get control over this spend. Okay. Again, I'm either doing a fantastic job or you're all really shy. No one's asking questions. That kind of worries me a little bit. Hey, I see a chat window, I think. No, okay. Well, again, Veronica and the rest of the team, you will interrupt if there are chat questions that come up. Oh, great. Now I got a window. I don't know how to get rid of it. Let's make this go away. Okay, perfect. I'll get that out of here. And I'll pull this down. And I apologize. This is the very first webinar that we've been doing of a long series of webinars. We're going to do these every 2 weeks, and they're going to change topics. And I hope you will come back. That's why we asked the question, would you recommend someone else come back? I want you to feel it was a great use of information. It was an exciting demo. You learned a ton. And if that's the case, you'll come back again and again and again. So this is the very first one. We'll clean it up. We'll make the Q&A work and the microphones work a little better on our next one. But thank you for bearing with us. Let me zoom back out again so I get my screen back. And then this is probably the most important slide. We're coming up toward the end, and I want to make sure that I spend just a little time on this. This is what it's all about. So this is a schematic of understanding how Azure works. And in many cases, this is why Azure is such a great resource. Let me kind of explain. In the middle here, we have this thing called the Azure Resource Manager. Now, I'm going to tell you right now, if you want to be the geekiest person on the world and no one like you, call it the Azure Resource Manager, because no one calls it that. It's called the ARM. It's Microsoft's love of three-letter acronyms. There was a joke, and this is absolutely a true story at Microsoft. The employees joked about this all the time, that we were so anal retentive on three-letter acronyms that this is true. Microsoft had an acronym to describe the acronyms. So you'd hear employees say, you're using too many TLAs. And TLA stood for three-letter acronym. So they had an acronym to describe their acronym. That's when you know you have some serious problems. But anyway, don't call it the Azure Resource Manager, because no one's going to know what that is. Call it the ARM. The ARM controls everything. It is Azure. And you'll notice that the ARM is tied directly to authentication. So the role-based access controls, the ability to spawn up resources, the licensing, the pricing, it's all tied in this together. And I could do a whole 8-hour presentation just on that. Some really, really powerful tools that Microsoft has. The ARM controls all these bottom level resources that we talked about, right? Remember, the lowest level of the hierarchy are the resources that you spin up. The data store, the web app, the virtual machines, literally there's hundreds, if not thousands of resources now that you can do. Okay, this is all expected. I would expect AWS, I expect Google, all the others, you should absolutely have some kind of tool that you can use to spin up these resources. That's great. It's what's on top that's absolutely fascinating. What Microsoft did is, from a developer standpoint, they attached these connection points into the ARM. So whether it's the Azure portal, which you've seen me using, PowerShell, which is the scripting language, the CLI, the REST API clients, JSON queries, I'm going to show you those in just a second. There's a number of ways that I can fully automate the ARM and take total control over it. So I can build policies, I can build blueprints, I can build rules and automation scripts and everything else. So let's use an example. I've got a resource that I use here in the United States. My employees use it all day long, but at night they go home, and after 5 o'clock at night, only a couple people use it. By 7 o'clock at night, that resource isn't doing anything. I can write a script inside of the development access control that says, look, every night at 7 p.m., gracefully shut down that machine, shut down that server, turn that service off, and then at 5 a.m. in the morning, go ahead and spin it back up. And now I don't have to pay for that service between the hours when no one's going to be using it. I can also make policies that say Veronica is up in the New York area, and so I know the closest cloud server to her is the East Region 1 server. And so I can make a policy that says, hey, look up Veronica, and based on where she is, the only service she should be able to use from a cloud perspective is East Service 1, right? So that she's using the quickest, least, she's got the fastest speed into the Microsoft Cloud and the cheapest cost in using it. So I can, again, programmatically through code, through script, I can write all these things in a really easy to use fashion, and then automate and control the resource manager on who can use it, when they can use it, which resource, turn a resource on, turn a resource off, full automation over everything. I'm going to end today's session here in just a few minutes by showing you one of these blown out to the 1000th degree. This thing is so intricate and so awesome and so cool. And it's a tool you can use to help you apply this kind of governance deal. This is my last slide before I get there, so you understand Microsoft takes role-based access control, that's the security. And if you're familiar with Active Directory, you understand how all this works, right? We can apply it to the user, to the group, to the division, to the whatever, to the object itself. I can set up policy definitions. Policy definitions include compliancy. I'm a financial institution and I need to follow Sarbanes-Oxley, or I said that wrong, but you know what I'm talking about. I'm a healthcare facility. I need to follow HIPAA compliance. Well, you can grab the HIPAA compliancy policies and just assign them to your organization If you're a US organization and you're a US healthcare provider, you have to do it. Just apply the HIPAA compliancy and now you're HIPAA compliant. Literally, Azure will prevent you from violating HIPAA if you set that up properly using these blueprints and policies and everything else. The last are these ARM templates, what we were talking about. Remember how when I got out there and I was screwing around and I way oversized my VM and I gave it too much memory and too many processors and I got this crazy GPU on there that costs tons of money. ARM templates can be set up for the individual workers, the individual divisions. Let me give you an example. When I go in to select my server, there are different families of servers or classifications. There's the B series of servers, which Microsoft uses for general business use stuff, right? Simple web servers and simple, just, I want to run some easy workloads off of there. My brother, I have many brothers. I'm one of 7 in my family, but one of my brothers is a semi-famous architect, and he needs to build render farms that do ray traced graphics, right? They require really high-end graphical servers with these really high-dollar graphical cards. Those are F series. They're special configurations of hardware designed for those workloads. In this case, doing render farms with ray tracing, and he can set up 30 servers and have them all run for 3 hours. And a normal rendering of one of his CAD CAM projects, which normally would take a day and a half to do in a normal environment, if he were doing it, he can do it under an hour by spinning up multiple instances. That's a great example. Well, guess what? I don't want to use that ray trace server to run my web service. I would just be wasting thousands of dollars by doing that. And literally the cost difference is thousands of dollars. So anyway, ARM templates allow me to set a policy for, hey, you're a dev, you're working in the dev environment, you want to set up a database. I'm going to give you a good, better, best option. I'm literally going to create a specification of a server that I would think is a good server for what you want to do. I'm also going to give you a better server, which is a little more of everything, and then I'm going to give you the best option, and that's the highest you're going to get out of me. Remember the battle I talked about between those who want the resources and the governance team that has to decide what's appropriate. Well, using ARM templates, the governance team can go into each group and each division and say, okay, for my dev and test people, I want them to be able to have this high-end server. I think there's times they're going to need it. They're going to provide me justification, but I'm going to spec it out. I'm going to give them a good, a better, and a best. And so when they go to create a server now, it looks them up and says, oh, you're in the dev test group. I'm going to pull this ARM template, which you've been given permission. Here's a good option. Here's a better option. Here's a best. And as long as one of these 3 work for you, I can say, give me the good option and deploy. And within minutes, I have my deployed database running, and it's all been properly governed. It's all got its cost controls. It's got its resource tags put in it. Everything that I've been teaching you in this whole session can be automated through this ARM template. And now my governance team doesn't have to worry about it because they're already using a pre-approved, pre-governed environment. That's what templates do for you. Those are those ARM templates. If I take my ARM templates, apply it to my compliance policies, my rules, my regulations, and add on top of that my role-based access controls for who can do what, bundle that all together, that's called a blueprint. And now, as an IT organization, I can create a blueprint with full governance on top of it, deploy it out, and now I just don't have to worry about it as people build things in my organization. I know only the right people with the right privileges have the ability to do it. They'll build it in the right environments. They'll use the right resources. They'll put the right cost controls on it. All my security is tied in there, so there's no more leaks or chances that someone could get through. Default gateways, DMZ, subnet masks. Again, so much that we could talk about. It would take much longer than an hour-long presentation. But I want you to know that's part of these Azure blueprints. If this isn't blowing your mind, some of you probably knew about this, but you didn't realize kind of the why and the how of how some of this stuff goes together. But I'm hoping this blows your mind to think about, I can create a button, I can program that button with 100% guidance to do it exactly as I want to fix all these problems that I showed you at the beginning of the slides. They push the button and it'll automate it all and do it all for me. Don't believe me? Let's go do it right now. That's how we'll finish today's deal. And Microsoft, one thing, I love this, so I wanted to add this. Microsoft uses this analogy all the time of building a metropolis, right? You don't, if you're going to build a huge city, you don't just start throwing buildings all over the place. Someone's got to go in and figure out where your water lines, your gas line, your sewer goes, where your roads are going to be. All that has to be designed before you ever start building. Azure governance is this concept. Figure out all the plumbing, figure out how all the security works, figure out everything before you start deploying workloads. Well, that's great, Mike. Where were you 2 years ago when I needed to do this during the pandemic and I was rushing to get this done? I couldn't apply the security. So what Microsoft did is they built a blueprint. I'm going to show it to you right now. I'll give you the location where it is. I'll put it in the chat. And what the blueprint allows you to do is build something called a landing zone. A landing zone is a well-governed space that you can set up, and you can put all these policies and blueprints and rules and role-based access, everything I've talked about. You can get it proper and set it up for perfect governance. And when you finally feel that it is doing everything that you need it to do, and by the way, this runs parallel to anything you've already deployed. So all your workloads that you currently have running in Azure doesn't touch them. It cannot. There's literally a wall between it. They can't interfere. But when you get this set up and you feel confident that this is a well-architected, well-governed framework, you can go to those already deployed workloads, right-click on them, and move them over into the landing zone. And the second they move over, they inherit the security, the management, the cost controls, everything I've been talking about all day today. Again, doesn't matter for me to show you that or talk about it. Let me show it to you. So I'm going to jump ahead. This is how I'm going to kind of finish today's deal, and then I'll kind of wrap it up and give you that 4-question survey here. Okay, so I'll send this link out. But what this does is, this is called the Cloud Adoption Framework for Enterprise Landing Zones. Microsoft calls this the CAF. Why? Because it's a 3-letter acronym, and they're psychotic about 3-letter acronyms. So you hear this called the CAF, Cloud Adoption Framework. And what it does is each one of these little blue buttons is a blueprint inside of Azure. Remember, a blueprint is the role-based access control mixed with the policies, put in with the templates, okay? The one I'm about to show you has 78 different moving parts. It's monstrous, but it's amazingly cool. We're going to use this one called Enterprise Hub and Spoke. But understand, Microsoft has this blueprint customized for if you just want to do a foundational deal for your networking, or you want a virtual WAN setup. Here's one for if you're a government. There's literally a bunch of these blueprints that are out here customized for, you know, if you're a government organization, you got to deploy to the government cloud. So this blueprint has been rewritten to deploy to the government cloud. The one we're going to use is this Enterprise Hub and Spoke. I'm just going to go ahead and click on this. Now, there are some permissions. You have to have some subscriptions set up ahead of time. There's a whole documentation on this that'll teach you all about this. If you decide to have a workshop with Fuji, we can come in and we'll do a lot of this work for you and kind of help you set up. But what it's going to do is it's going to start asking you some simple questions, and they really are simple questions. What's your cloud environment? Where are you going to put this? We want this in the Azure cloud. Notice that China has its own separate entity and the US government has its own separate entity, but we're going to put it in the Azure Commercial Cloud to start with. And it's just going to ask some really simple stuff. What's your closest region to where you're deploying this? Again, because I'm in Dallas, I'm going to change this to South Central region. These are alphabetical. So if I go down here, here is South Central US. So that's the one right here in Dallas. Again, closest access, cheapest cost to me. And then you just start moving through this and you say next. It says, okay, let's set up your Azure core setup. Now this one's very cool. This is what's called a root prefix, excuse me. And so if I put this in as FEUJI CAF, it's going to, every resource that it creates, it's going to append the word Fuji CAF on the front of it. The reason Microsoft does this is if for any reason you decide this isn't for me and I don't want this landing zone anymore and whatever, or I want to start up another one, or I did it wrong, and you can just go back now and just do a search and say everything with the name FujiCalf, just go ahead and delete that resource. So it's really easy to remove this from your deployment inside of Azure. So whatever we get here, I'm not going to go through all of this, but I'll show you some of the examples. I go into platform and security management, and it just starts asking questions. Hey, do you want to deploy a tracking solution? Do you need a log file? How much space do you want in the log file? And if you don't know what any of this stuff is, hover over the little I button, and it'll say, hey, deploying Agent Health. Agent Health is about subscription management. It's going to use the ARM to help you, so give you some more information. And you can click yes or no or whatever. My recommendation, having done a lot of these, is just go in and turn everything off the first time you do it, okay? And the reason I'm saying that is if you turn it off, it will go out and it will build the structure for you ready to go. And the blueprints are written so brilliantly that if you go rerun the blueprint over itself, if it sees something already deployed, it just skips over it. And now the second time through, I can go back and say, you know what, I really do want these VM insights, so I'm going to turn this back on. And the second time it runs through the script, it just skips everything that had already successfully deployed, and it only goes to those sections that you want to add or remove. And so it runs a lot faster, a lot cleaner the second time. So that's just a personal deal. But you can see there's lots of questions. Are you going to use Defender? If so, where do you want the email to go? What about this? What about this? And you're just yes, yes, no, 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 no. Of course, Microsoft is recommending all of their services. One of the things that we do for you, if you hire Fuji to take you through a workshop, our cloud architect will tell you exactly which ones to turn on and turn off with the mindset of you don't want anything to bill you, right? Some of these recommended that Microsoft gives you actually will start billing you if you deploy them. And so we make sure the customer understands, if it was me, go ahead and turn this off. You really don't need this. Or this one really is important based on what you're trying to do. And so we'll kind of guide you through and recommend you. You keep going through this whole thing, you answer all these sections, and at the very end, it checks the script to see if everything's going to work properly. So it kind of does a test run. If you get flying colors on that, you say, go ahead and deploy. It takes about an hour to 2 hours to do it, even if you turn everything off. The first time through, it's building, again, like I said, 87 different parameters and features and functions to build you a landing zone with as much governance attached to it as humanly possible, okay? And so the last part of this is, it doesn't mean that you're immediately ready to go. You now have to go in and start building policies and setting up your rules, but all the infrastructure stuff is put in place. I will do one last plug as kind of I wrap this up. You can do this yourself. You don't need Fuji. If you want to, go to town. The reason you might want to use Fuji or any other partner that does this, although I think we're one of the key only partners, certainly the ones endorsed by Microsoft to go do this. But anyway, different story. But if you want Fuji to do this, the part I'm not telling you about is as part of the workshop, day one, it's a 2-day workshop. Day one is myself usually sits down and interviews you and asks you a bunch of questions about what is it you're really trying to do? Because it's the part that everyone tends to skip. They want to get into the tool and they want to play, but if you don't have the plan really well thought out, you're going to get right back into the governance problems that we were talking about. So Microsoft built this. This isn't something I created. It's a formula that Microsoft has. And I asked you a bunch of questions, and we talk about security, and we talk about what workloads you do want to automate, what do you not want to automate? Are you multi-cloud? 70% of every customer I talk to is multi-cloud. They have AWS, or they have Azure, and they have Google, or whatever the case may be. Let's define that. Let's figure out which workloads are going to go where. Let's make sure the security matches that. And the end of day one, after I interview you, I write up a full, formal, very long business plan that describes every single thing you're trying to do. And then I hand that off to a cloud architect who looks at it, and their job is to walk you through this blueprint and give you their advice. You can do this, you can pick and choose. That's not the real value. The value is to have an architect to say, okay, it's wanting to push me to have my log file. Notice here, my data retention. You can crank this up if you want for 2 to 3 years, if that's what you so desire. My architect's going to say, you don't need this. You really don't want to keep that data that long. Let's talk about really why you need more than a 30-day deal. Here's my advice. And they give you lots of good stories and lots of feedback on why you would or would not want to do that. That's the value of that workshop. So you get the full business plan, everyone gets on the same page about what you're trying to do, and then the architect reads that plan and helps you fill this out so that at the end of it, you get deployed a real well-governed landing zone that, again, you can kind of transition and move this stuff over. I wish we had a ton more time. There's just so much to talk. And again, I'm trying to divide these discussions. Every 2 weeks, we're going to have these type of discussions, and I'm trying to divide them into little manageable segments that you can join in and share some stories and ask questions and do all that. We are at the end of today's.